Paying for a place to live is a problem for millions of Texans. A new poll released by the Texas Lyceum found half of the adults in the state say it's difficult to find affordable housing in their community. The problem leads to a bigger question. What role should government play when it comes to affordable housing? Our Robert Hadlock spoke to one of the people behind the poll to look at how Texans answered that question.
Joining us now is Joshua Blank, Research Director with the Texas Politics Project. And Joshua, you helped oversee the Lyceum poll looking at the Texans' attitudes about housing. Why poll on this issue, and why is it important right now?
Well, I think if you're looking at the political discussion in the state and really the discussion more broadly, housing comes up again and again, whether we're talking about land use or affordability or whether Texas is really an inviting place for people. And we always talk about these things in these sort of abstract concepts like median household income and median home price and whether it's keeping track or not. Whereas what we really want to do with this poll is figure out, well, how do Texans feel about housing? What is their felt experience of living in the Lone Star State?
What did your poll find about the affordability issue in Texas?
Well, this is the thing. Everybody talks about the affordability issue and how unaffordable housing is, but we don't really know, again, what people's felt experience is. And so what we found overall was that, number one, when we asked people, is it easy or is it difficult for someone like yourself to find affordable housing in your community, right? And just to make it abstract, about 50% of people say it's difficult. And this is true across all racial and ethnic groups. It doesn't really matter whether you're in an urban location or a suburban location or a rural location. Generally speaking, there's a sense that it's difficult to find affordable housing. But then we also asked, well, what about you? Do you spend too much of your income on housing? And again, we found about 50% of Texans who said, yeah, I do. And in fact, it jumps up to 64% amongst Texans who rent, right? What we find is that African American and Hispanic Texans are more likely than white Texans to say that they're spending too much of their income on housing. And so, what this kind of tells us is that, one, affordability is definitely an issue. It's part of people's felt experience here.
We passed property tax reform in Texas during the session a while back. Is that addressed in your poll, and the role of government in helping out with affordability?
Right. We didn't ask too much about property taxes in particular. One, we weren't confident in people's ability to suss out the difference between sort of, let's say their payment on the principal versus the property taxes they're paying and whether one or the other is too much or too little. So we asked about costs in general. So one of the things we asked was, do you think, given that affordability is such an issue, do you think that state government and also city governments, two separate questions, should be more involved in providing affordable housing? Or is that not the role of city and state government? That's important here in Texas, because in Texas, I think, one of the things that we want to ask is this even a role for government? And what we found was we actually found overwhelming support for government involvement in housing. And in fact, in particular, there was a more openness to city governments getting involved in increasing the amount of affordable housing. And if you look at Republicans in particular, the one group you think, well, maybe they're not going to be into this. On state involvement, they were about split 50-50, but even 60% of Republicans said that city governments need to be more involved in making sure that affordable housing is available.
That might surprise a lot of people. You also looked at homelessness. How important is that issue to Texans?
Homelessness is a big issue. About half of Texans say that homelessness is a problem in their community. And what's interesting about that, I think one of the most interesting things maybe, is that while, not surprisingly, 60% of Texans who live in an urban environment say that homelessness is a problem in their community, it drops to about 40% in suburban environments, about 33% in rural parts of the state. Now, what's interesting is you say, well, okay, that's a lot less. Not surprising. But if you pause for a second and say, so a third of Texans living in rural parts of the state actually still perceive homelessness as a problem in their community. And what that tells us is that homelessness is not just a city problem in Texas, even though it feels that way. It's a problem in the suburbs. It's also a problem in rural areas, even if it's less visible.
A very pertinent and timely poll. Joshua Blank with the Texas Politics Project. Thanks so much for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
You bet.
Despite concerns about affordability, the poll found that most Texans are happy with their current housing situation. 81% said they were either very satisfied or somewhat satisfied with the home they live in now. Basically, it's great to live in Texas. Thank you again for joining us for State of Texas. I'm Josh Hinkle. We'll be back next week to bring you an in-depth look at Texas politics.